I'm Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And you're listening to
the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. I'm Desiree.
And I'm Heather.
And this week, we are going to talk about something that's probably going to trigger some people. Don't we do that often enough? But
I think any opinion can trigger somebody.
Pretty much. So today's episode, we are talking about how millennial women have paved ways. Hear us out. We're going to be talking about a few things that I definitely agree millennial women have broken through for coming generations. And now this isn't an original idea from us. I actually stumbled upon a TikTok from another podcast that was kind of talking about this subject. And I was like, ooh, because honestly, I hadn't really thought about it. But when I came across it and I started to think about it in my own time and just breaking down things that definitely have shifted that previous generations may have, because I'm not going to say, obviously none of this is a blanket statement. I'm not going to say like only millennial women. No, we have continued the progress that many women before us have been doing for decades and centuries. But I do believe that as a generation as a whole, we have really made certain statements and changes that have changed the status quo in society in many ways. So I'm excited to talk about this. The funny thing is that they kind of gave it a theme, talking about how millennial women are the final girl generation.
Oh gosh.
No pressure.
That is like ominous and also very complimentary.
But the thing is, both aspects of it do match. The ominous and the complimentary aspect of it.
Yeah, it's true.
You can actually break it down to reveal both. Now, as a horror aficionado over here, you you are very familiar with the term final girl.
Yeah.
So do you want to maybe break down for the audience who isn't maybe familiar with the term?
Yeah, I guess so. I never really thought about people not knowing what a final girl is. But basically in horror, mostly movies, but you also have this in books as well. The final girl is pretty much the girl that is the main character, even if it's in an ensemble cast where it seems like everybody's kind of getting equal show time and equal dialogue. There's always one girl that's like the standout. The one that you know is the lead, even if it's just by a hair. And she is quite literally the final girl. She's the only one that is alive at the end and the only one that ends up surviving. Obviously, not all horror follows that trope. But there are so many great examples of that. Midsommar, you have Florence Pugh's character. She ends up being the final girl, the only one alive out of her group of friends. You have Scream movies. You have Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A lot of those movies follow the final girl formula where there's one person at the end. It's usually a female. And this is not the same as it used to be, but it also used to be like whoever the virgin was. That trope has been, thankfully annihilated, and now it's not a thing anymore. But that used to be, it was like the more innocent girl, usually more intellectual, better problem solver than the rest of them.
Yeah, funny enough, what you said in the beginning, I never heard the term until maybe 5 years ago. I didn't know that was a thing. So I learned little by little through, social media and stuff, as one does nowadays. And it was funny because when I looked up the definition of final girl, that was one thing I removed from it that you mentioned, was that it had to be the virginal pure one.
Thankfully it's not like that. There are plenty of movies out there that really, really break that taboo. There was one in particular, Mia Goth played a character in it. I think it's called X or something with X in it. She wanted to be an actress, and the movie takes place like around the 70s, and they're basically making a porn film. And they go on this property and they rent out this barn from this really old couple. And so not only is it breaking the stigma of like it has to be a virgin, but it's like slapping that in the face because she was the opposite of virginal.
Love that.
But it's usually she's brave. She usually has a good moral code, because sometimes the characters in the horror movies, they can be very morally gray, or they can just be like bad people, and you're like, I'm okay if you die, you know? So she's usually pure in the sense that she's moral in some way, brave, intelligent, resourceful, and that's why she ends up being the final girl.
Yeah, I mean, for those who really like classic horror movies, think of Halloween, Michael
Yeah,
Myers,
Jamie Lee
and
Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis definitely was final girl energy for that entire franchise, really, because she even came back 20 years later.
Oh yeah, she's the ultimate final girl for real.
Absolutely. So funny enough that they phrased it in that sense. That's more just like a fun little kitschy way of trying to have this conversation. But on a more serious note, I did find it interesting when Heather and I kind of brainstormed this episode. There were a few points that we brought up that we were like, wow, but actually, if we think about it, there are significant shifts, generational shifts that millennials most definitely played a huge part, especially millennial women. So let's talk about some of those.
Before we get into specifically what I feel like millennial women and just millennials in general have done to progress our generation and the world around us, it's very telling to me that for women specifically, the suffrage movement, the movement to gain rights for women, to gain bodily autonomy, all of those things obviously happened in previous generations. Those women really set the foundation and paved the way for us to then take it further.
Yes.
Thinking about the fact that it wasn't that long ago for us anyway, when you think about the 80s and the 70s, it was in the 70s that women were finally able to take out a credit card without having a male co-signer, to have their own bank account without having a male co-signer, to get a loan. And what opportunities that opened up for women to be more financially independent. I think that that has a lot to do with who we are now, because I think that if we were still sort of under the thumb of men and marriage in general, then the patriarchy, because it's not just our husbands, it's our fathers too. And I don't talk about that a lot, and I don't think about that a lot because I didn't have a present father figure in my life. So I forget how oppressive a father figure in the home can be sometimes. Not always, because there are plenty of really good dads out there, but just the idea of being independent, we have never known what it's like to have to always have a man in order to do things. We were able to fully step into our independence from a very early age, whereas our mothers were like half and half. You know, they were the generation like us who saw something come into fruition, and there was still a lot of old mentalities that needed to be broken, whereas we never really had those chains. And so I think it's just really important to note that, because I think that that has a lot to do with why we are able to do some of the things that we're able to do so freely, and why our mentality is so different, even from Generation X, which is right before us.
Yeah, literally just one generation ago. We're not even talking about like how long ago these things. No, like literally it wasn't that long ago, guys.
My older sister's Gen X.
Yeah, so my brother was.
It's 7 years apart. It's not that it's not that intense of a difference. Also, we talked in a previous episode about the self-help movement and how that really took off in the 70s and 80s, and how we as millennials fully benefited from that movement and the popularization of it. And then with social media and it becoming sort of like a global movement. Again, I think this is all reason why, because I don't want to just come off as like we're just a special generation. No, there's reasons why. And a lot of that is due to the previous generations paving the way for us to be where we are. And hopefully we get to do the same for the generations that follow. But one of the things, and I can say this from a female perspective, but also my husband is in the same boat as me. We're very much a generation of leaving toxic family members and friends and all of that behind. So breaking ties with family members, which in turn, a lot of times breaks generational curses.
Mm-hmm.
Because we use the word curse, it seems so mystical and so mysterious, and it's really not. Generational curses are usually just generational trauma that is passed down from adult to child. And usually it's perpetuated by certain toxic behaviors that just the pattern of that never gets broken.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to break that pattern than just cutting that toxic person out entirely. My husband has done it with extremely close family members, as close as you can get. I have done it. I actually have several siblings too that I don't talk to anymore and I don't have a relationship with anymore. And it's for very valid reasons. One of them is a narcissist and is not really able to have an equitable relationship. It's just very one-sided. It's very much, what can I get out of you? What can you do for me? Kind of thing. And then the other one, there's such an age gap. We never really bonded. And then as I got older and I stepped into adulthood, they lashed out at me for the way that I was living my life. I heard from the sibling that I am close with that they felt remorse about that and that they were apologetic, but I never got an apology from this person. So I decided, it was my decision in both these situations, that these relationships didn't serve me. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I just mean like they would bring trauma into my life. They would bring toxicity, negativity, and stress. And girl, I'm already dealing with high cortisol. I'm already dealing with burnout. I don't need people in my life that are going to further that trauma.
Yeah.
And so I think the reason why us millennials are kind of putting our foot down when it comes to that, because the older generations, be it boomers and even Gen X, they're like, blood is thicker than water. How could you turn your back on your family? And you see that a lot on social media, parents going onto TikTok, going onto various social media platforms, talking about their kids, cutting them off and being so offended and not understanding why, putting themselves as the victim. When in reality, a lot of times those kids, those family members that have cut you off have given you chance after chance after chance after chance to fix what it is that is causing the issue. The problem is that you didn't want to acknowledge it or do anything about it. You just wanted to continue to act the way that you do, even though they've told you time and time again how it affects them, how unacceptable it is. And then they finally got to a point where they were like, if you're not going to change, then the only thing that I can do in this situation is remove myself from the situation. Because really, if you think about it, all we have control over is ourselves and our own actions. And because we understand that, and we understand that we can't force anyone to change. And I think that in previous generations, it was kind of like you accept, because it's family, you accept the behavior and you tolerate the behavior. But I think that there was also a very hidden hope there that if you just talk to them enough, if you cry in front of them, if you let them see how it's affecting you, that they'll change. And I think that our generation, because of so many different factors that have helped us come to see that that is not the case. You cannot change other people. People have to change on their own and they have to want to change. And that just because somebody doesn't change doesn't mean that you just have to sit there and put up with it and tolerate it. And to be honest, our generation has been through a lot. We went through 9/11. We went through a pandemic. We went through a recession. We went through so many different traumatic things throughout our lives. We've experienced so much, and an economy that has been stagnant.
Y2K, remember Y2K?
Oh yeah, the world was going to end.
Yes, and the whole internet was going to crash and every company was going to go black.
All the computers are going to reset and we're going to be in the Stone Ages again. There's a lot, and I'm sure every generation has their things.
Of course.
And then to top all of that off, you have a economy that has pretty much been stagnant our whole lives. I mean, we haven't seen minimum wage go up pretty much almost our entire lives. And so with the pressure of not being able to economically be successful in the way that our parents were able to, where they were able to get a house with one income. And with several incomes, not even being able to make that a reality, I think that we kind of reached a tipping point where we're like, enough is enough. I need to have peace somewhere in my life. And if I can't get it from our economy, if I can't get it culturally through our society and through the government that, governs us, if I cannot find stability there, I'm going to find stability in my own house. I'm going to get my house in order. And in order to do that, you have to remove everything and everyone that is trying to rob you of your peace. Because again, we've learned all we can control is us.
Yes.
And our environment.
So it's interesting and sad because here are two extremely influential, powerful women who are older. They're either late Gen X or boomer, and I'll say who they are. They're basically influencing us all to do the opposite of what you just said, which is Mel Robbins and Oprah Winfrey. They recently came out a couple months ago insisting that we need to stop breaking ties with our family members, that we need to stick together now more than ever and just put aside our differences. It was so disappointing, especially honestly, Oprah doesn't surprise me. Mel Robbins, who is a huge motivational life coach speaker about anxiety and all these different things how to live your best life and all that stuff. So right now she's a huge influence. So many people were disappointed to realize you're trying to teach people how to better themselves emotionally, mentally, those above all, and then obviously trickles down physically. But her focus is on mental health and emotional regulation. But then you're encouraging
which
in the same breath.
Yeah,
exactly. No. So it's sad because that is something that thankfully, as millennials, our generation is standing up and saying enough is enough, because there was a point you made in the beginning about all the movements and people who have paved the ways so that us as millennials can be in the place we're in now, taking the stances and making the changes and demanding changes. And a lot of people may assume that that's just a natural trickle down of generations, but that's not always true, because think of really young Gen Zers and how they surprised so many of us at the polls in November a year ago. And we thought you would have thought, with all that has been taught throughout history, how us as millennials, really put things on the forefront for change. Then here comes the next generation. Clearly, they're going to make the right decisions to further healthy, positive changes, right? And it was shocking to us all to realize a lot of them actually didn't.
Well,
so it's
a lot of them were raised by Gen Xers.
That too. But at the end of the day,
sorry.
No, but we all have a choice. We all also had access to the same information for the most part. It's not as black and white. I know that. So as much shit as everyone gives millennials, honestly, if we think about it, it's not about being better. It's not about being superior. It's a fact that I think it was a collective trickling down effect that, like Heather said, had all of us saying enough is enough. Yeah. And we wanted to choose differently.
Yeah, I think that conservatism will always exist because a lot of it is tied to religion, and religion has prevailed through the centuries. And I think that as long as religion is something that is prevalent in shaping people's lives, there will always be conservative viewpoints and there will always be resistance to certain progress. But I do think that the household that you were raised in does play a bit of a factor.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of change happens to people in their mid to late 20s. That's when you really realize, that's when we woke up, when we were like, oh, this is not for us. But think about it. We were a voting age for quite a while before we had changed.
Yeah.
And mind you, my family was always Democrat. I thought most Christians were. I didn't realize that to be Christian meant that you had to be Republican. So it was never, back then, it wasn't so much of a contrast between the two parties. But there were certain viewpoints that I had back then that I don't have anymore, like about abortion and things like that, that I would have previously voted against women having access to abortion, and I would never do that now. So I do think that age has a lot to do with it. I'm hoping some of these Gen Zers will grow up and see the light. But I do think that our generation is very unique, and that majority of us chose to take a certain route. And it is disappointing to see, not surprising, because again, they're from a different generation, to see some of these very famous and influential people coming out and trying to, I mean, you're talking about families who previously protected and hid predators. You know, that uncle that you would see in family functions. Everybody knew that he was disgusting. Everybody knew that he was a predator, and yet he was protected because he was family. He was still allowed to go to the family functions. He was still allowed to be around your kids. And if anything ever happened, the blame was automatically put on the victim as opposed to the perpetrator, and they were still allowed to be protected and allowed to stick around because they were family.
Thank God my mother was my mother.
Right?
I had an uncle, but he got taken care of real quick. Not by his family, by my mother.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You always have those black sheep. That is what they refer. My mom was a black sheep in her family.
My mom too. Yep.
So I was very fortunate to be her daughter because my mom would have never tolerated that shit. Whereas I'm very aware that my extended family would have and has protected predators. And so I very much, oh gosh, it's one of those things where it's more nuanced than that. We're not just talking about like I don't get along with somebody. We're talking about legitimate trauma, legitimate attacks on your mental health, on your stability, on your peace. Like, it's not this, oh, we just disagreed.
No, it's so much more than that.
It's so much more than that. So to hear it whittled down to, you know, you shouldn't break family ties because family ties are, you know what? Family is whatever you make of it.
Thank you. Yes. I don't believe blood makes family.
No.
From personal experience, blood does not make family.
No, it's the people that you choose. You know, one of the things that came out of the queer community that I truly appreciate, because so many queer people, when they came out, lost relationships with their family members, is the concept of a chosen family. And that you get to decide who you consider to be family. Desiree and I consider each other to be family. We have like a 20+ year relationship, been through everything together, ride or die type of situation. Our friendship has been tested, and we have stood through those tests and the test of time even.
I will crawl to Colorado to Heather during an emergency before I ever even think of thinking of my blood relations for help. It wouldn't even be a thought to think of them over Heather.
Yeah, because one of the mental health things that we're taught is that actions speak louder than words. So why would I let the fact that we are blood relatives have any sway in whether or not you're a person that I can trust and confide in, a person that I can go to, which should be the definition of what a family member is. If your actions have told me that you don't care about me, that you don't care about my feelings, you don't care about my boundaries, that you are only interested in what you can get out of this relationship, then you don't deserve the title of family, period.
Nope. So that's definitely one of the points that I think very much have separated us as a whole. Because again, these statements that we're claiming for this generation is not that they've never been done before, is that as a whole, majority of the millennial generation has chosen these actions or ideals, or have made these choices and demanded these changes more so than not, which is more than any previous generation. That is why we're saying, and again, not to assume that, well, of course, because it's the trickling down of each generation more and more. Obviously, that's not the case. So one of those things that Heather kind of also already touched on, and we've talked about plenty on this podcast, is mental health. Again, mental health has been something that people have been fighting for centuries. Unfortunately, it took until our generation as a whole to finally put our foot down. Not just us who suffered, but even medical professionals who fought to have more understanding, to have more research, to have more data regarding all the various mental health struggles and issues and diagnoses that were ignored or considered taboo every generation prior. And with that came also people finally stepping out and talking about their experiences, which was also very taboo in our parents' generation. So again, not that it was so long ago, our literal parents couldn't talk about taboo issues like mental health. And as we realized, I feel, as millennials, as we got older and in our mid 20s realized we can talk about this, we got bolder and more loud about it, and then started demanding for better regulation and change regarding it. And I think that is in huge part, thankfully, to the millennial generation that many generations prior paved the way for. I feel like we're going to have to reiterate that for certain clips, because I bet if, people don't always watch the full episode.
Yeah, taken out of context. Anything taken out of context. But we even talked about it in a previous episode regarding self-improvement and how the self-improvement industry really blew up in the 70s and 80s, which is not really our generation. It is for some elder millennials that are on the cusp, but most millennials are from the 90s and on. And so even though that kind of blew up in the 70s and 80s, it's an understanding of like, we grew up with it. That's the difference, is that other previous generations, they were either already teenagers or young adults to being adults when that really became a thing. We benefited from it in a different way than the previous generation, because I think when you grow up and something is normalized, then a lot of the stigma surrounding it, you don't have to fight through as much and fight through the shame of like, oh no, I got to go see a therapist. For us, therapy is totally normal and something that everybody should. Yes, and something that everybody should do. And we also talked about in that episode how social media really made an impact on normalizing mental health, but also being able to identify and relate to things that other people are diagnosed with and be like, oh, I have those symptoms. Like, oh, maybe blah, blah, blah. And know what you said previously is fact and not able to be argued with, because you know that millennials are paving the way for certain things because of the amount of resistance. Because how many people are like, oh, we're too politically correct now? Or how many people complain, it's like, oh, everybody's got a mental health disorder now. You know what I mean? You hear that all the time. And so if it wasn't so prevalent as we're saying in our generation, people wouldn't go out of their way to complain about it, or go out of their way like Oprah to actually try to counteract it. If we weren't breaking familial ties for our mental health and for our peace, you wouldn't have these, supposed mental health gurus going up there and being like, maybe you shouldn't do that. They wouldn't address it if it wasn't a thing that was happening commonly.
Exactly. It's funny that you mentioned this, because I literally saved this from Pinterest, I think yesterday. And it was saying how like anyone going, why are there suddenly so many ADHD diagnoses? Dr. Jen, same reason there are suddenly more stars after we built more telescopes.
Thank you. And, I don't think that we should go around diagnosing ourselves. I think that we should go to professionals to be diagnosed with something. But there's nothing wrong with going, oh, I relate to that. Maybe I could be on the spectrum, or maybe I could. We think that it's more now, but what you have to realize is back then, people weren't being diagnosed. The concept of autism wasn't a thing. The concept of ADHD was not a thing to even be able to diagnose people.
And when they did come onto the scene as a thing, they were very generalized into these very minimal stereotypical categorizations that did not match the true effect that it has on multiple people in various ways that only recently we're coming to notice and learn, and the data is showing. So no, it's not that all of a sudden, because I see it with everything. As someone with PCOS, oh, suddenly everyone has PCOS because they want to be trendy. I'm like, fuck you. There is absolutely nothing trendy about living in a debilitating body that fights you every day of your life and that makes you miserable. No, it's the fact that the medical system has failed us for decades and didn't have any means of not even diagnosing people. They didn't even take things seriously. Fibromyalgia, which I also have, was one of those things that when I was diagnosed in my mid-20s, the term was not officially in the medical system. It was being talked about as becoming the term. But my doctor at the time said, what we are studying about this thing we potentially will call fibromyalgia, you have all the symptoms for it. So it's not that people are suddenly all having issues out of nowhere.
No.
These things were always prevalent. The
Yeah.
science was not available, and then society was not willing to talk about it.
Oh, 100%. I can tell you a perfect example. I am a huge fan of the Golden Girls. There was an episode where Dorothy had some sort of sickness that no doctor was able to diagnose.
Yes.
And they told her to go see a psychologist, and she pulled out all of these letters from psychologists that she's seen and said, I have seen this person, this person, this person. Here are the letters. They all say that it is not anything mental.
I am of sound mind, yes.
But here's what he said in return. He goes, well, what do they know? Psychology isn't a science. And that mentality, and that's coming from a medical professional. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's acting, it's fictional, but that mentality,
it was literally art imitating life, because the point they brought it up as a fictional topic is because it was actually prevalent and real in the real
exactly
world.
And the study of psychology and the study of mental health has not been taken seriously enough. And what they used to do with people that had mental health disorders is just put them away in an asylum where they were either, left there for the rest of their lives, or experimented on, or lobotomized, heavily medicated, X, Y, and Z. And now we're actually taking it more seriously and legitimizing it so that people can live their lives without all the stigmas surrounding it. I will say this for me. It was through social media that I realized that you could have schizophrenia and not be a dangerous person. I've seen somebody with schizophrenia show their everyday life, show what their experience is like, living normally. Yes, having this mental health issue, but still trying to live their life as normally as possible. I've seen that with sociopaths too, which we always associate with being killers and murderers. And I've seen a few of them be like, yes, I am diagnosed as a sociopath. Yes, I experienced this, this, and this, but I don't go out and harm anyone. The same thing with dissociative identity disorder. How many times have we seen in movies that somebody with a split personality disorder has a personality that goes out and kills a bunch of people? Like, these are the type of stigmas we're now seeing are not true in all cases. You can't just blanket an entire group of people assuming that because they have schizophrenia, because they have DID, because they are sociopaths, that they're a danger to society. And a lot of the times, them being dangers potentially could have a lot to do with the fact that there was no help available for them.
Yeah. Imagine your brain feeling completely wired all the time, that overstimulation, the body can only handle so much, and without proper help and regulation, or to even know how to, I mean, that's going to take a toll on different people. Add to that whatever life circumstances they're facing on a day-to-day basis. There's so many factors involved. I mean, even ADHD, we grew up only knowing it as like erratic boy behavior. That was like the only description, and that was the only tell sign of someone with ADHD.
It manifested differently in women, and women weren't getting diagnosed until later in life.
Yes. So there are so many things that, again, thankfully, people kept knocking on doors, being open and talking about these things. And then us as a generation, I feel, definitely perpetuated that forward by not regressing or believing things like, all I can think of is RFK Jr. And because, again, we have younger generations who sadly are buying into all these radical theories that are not backed at all by science or data. So, it's sad because as the millennial generation, we want to move forward. We don't want to take steps backwards. And we really try to be loud about things that we saw our ancestors fight for, and said, we need to continue this, and we need to regulate it, and we need to make this the norm. Sadly, at the moment, it feels like we're taking steps backwards, but I feel very much that the millennial generation has been trying to keep hold of the progression we've made as
Yeah.
humanity.
You know why? Because our generation was sold the pipe dream of a college
Oh,
education was going to get you that house, that job, that car, that
the
lifestyle that
American
you wanted.
dream.
Exactly. And you know what? It backfired on the boomers because instead of giving us economic stability, which really wasn't determined by whether or not we had a college degree, it was
No.
determined by whether or not we had livable wages. It did have an effect, a great impact on us. It made us educated. It made us readers. It made us connoisseurs of information. And so therefore we're able to make informed decision. And now look
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. Education is being attacked. It's being villainized. And so of course, with that and with just how atrocious education is in this country, and to no fault of any teachers, we love teachers, but to just the fault of the government and what it's able to provide for education, for funding, different things like that, I feel like we are more concentrated on having laborers than we are having academics in this
Mm.
country. And let's be honest, having an educated population is harder to control. That's why we as millennials are harder to control, because we are educated, because we know better, and because we have looked at history and seen the pattern recognition of what previous generations endured and what we're seeing now and how those things are similar. Those that don't know the past are doomed to repeat it. It's about education. It's about being informed. And so yeah, we're different because we all were like fed college so much and so hard, and our whole educational history was getting good scores on your SATs, getting good scores on your state tests, all of these things in preparation for college. And then we get to college and guess what? We learn the truth about American history. We learn the truth about women's rights. We learn the truth about a lot of different things that we were told differently when we were in primary school. Our minds opened up, they expanded. We started to think critically instead
Mm-hmm.
of just believing what we're told. We're the generation that you had to cite 2 or 3 sources just to get a good grade on your paper.
Yes.
You know, we don't rely on ChatGPT to write everything for us.
Sources a lot of times required us to go into actual encyclopedia books.
Yeah, we read
It was a,
books.
we had to. Not
Crazy.
everything was at our fingertips the way it is
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we talked about millennial women specifically and the rights that we gained from previous generations. And so this particular one is specifically about millennial women,
mm-hmm.
just because the society we live in is a patriarchal society, and so there are a lot of expectations and there are a lot of restrictions
Mm.
to say on women that fortunately for us, and I'm very grateful to previous generations because I know what women went through to gain the right to vote. I know what women of color have gone through to just be seen as being humans and having, you know, equal rights or equal opportunities. We understand what it's like to grow up in a world where women are not as restricted and as
Mm.
held back by the patriarchy. We still
Mm.
have a long way to go. There's still a lot that we need to do that we have not done yet. But at the same time, I feel like, as far as financial freedom, for a while there, we had bodily autonomy.
Mm.
We don't completely now, and that's a shame, but we did. And we were able to be participants in the workforce. There is still a significant gap as far as like pay goes between
Mm-hmm.
male and female employees, but we were able to work our way up that career ladder to be executive, to be CEOs, to own our own businesses. When even to get a business loan previously, you had to have a man co sign with you, which meant that he was financially responsible for
Mm-hmm.
your business and had somewhat of a say and control over it, where now you are 100% owner, you are 100% responsible and accountable for this. And with that, you saw women thrive. I read this in The Feminine Mystique, if anyone has ever read that, but women, specifically in the 50s and 60s, would go to college. They would get a college
Mm-hmm.
education, but they really went to college to find a husband.
Yes.
And once they settled down, typically after college, they would settle down and getting married and immediately start a family. That college education,
The
that
degree
degree
was,
went
yeah.
into a drawer, boop,
Because it served its
Never heard from
purpose.
again.
You met a good man who was going to have a good future and job, and
Yeah.
he chose you. So lucky you, you got to now live the dream.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, we're like, oh, we don't need a man to rent a home. We don't need a man to live. We're not restricted by our financial dependence anymore. I still think it took time for women to
Oh, yeah.
realize that they don't have to be under the thumb of the patriarchy. And there are still women that love it. They love licking that patriarchal boot. But a lot of women saw this as an opportunity to improve themselves, to take their education and actually do something with it, to become entrepreneurs, to become their own bosses, to become independent, to buy a home, to buy a car, all in their name without a man. And then they realized, do I need to get married? Do I need to prescribe to all of the steps that I'm told I need to take as a woman in order to have a successful, viable life of getting married and popping out children?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, we actually had the opportunity to stop and think about that because it wasn't demand anymore. It was now a choice.
Yep.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is really what feminism is. It's giving you a choice to decide what you want to do with your life, whether you want to have kids and be at home and be a housewife or a stay at home mom, or whether you want to go and work and be part of the workforce, have a career, have no kids, never get married. Those are all viable options now. Whereas before, if you didn't get married, you couldn't do anything for yourself. You were out on the street, essentially.
Because your parents couldn't afford to keep you either. You had to go and find a husband to take care of you now for the rest of your life. And if you're not having children, what is your purpose in life then? That's what it was. That was the mentality. And it's wild because someone spoke about this, and someone in the comments of a post ignorantly thought they were making a great point. Sadly, this is the opinion of many people who just don't educate themselves simply using Google. But one woman was like, I love the patriarchy because my husband's great. I got a good husband and I love being married. And someone was like, and guess what? You got to choose to do that. That's feminism. Like, the fact that they think people have no true understanding or concept of what patriarchy is and what feminism is. Okay, being a feminist does not mean you hate men and marriage and anything traditional. That is not what that means. Like Heather said, it's having equal choice like anyone else in this world, period. Having the ability to choose what you want in your life. And being a trad wife is a choice that you get to make and talk about. It's wild to me that, for example, the SAVE Act that got voted on by obviously all Republicans, but some Democrats, and the SAVE Act is basically saying that women who are married, because they had to change their names because the patriarchal system created that, now that their names don't match their birth certificate, they won't be allowed to vote, is what they're trying to now push further. And what's wild to me is that, I mean, the Republican women who voted on it, their mind is warped. But the Democratic women, because they showed us who of the Democrats voted also for this, I was like, you're a woman. You're in a position of power that you are only allowed because of the progressive movements that gave you this opportunity. Like, it's baffling to me that the hypocrisy and just the twisted, how like you're making decisions that affect your entire gender. Anyways, it's very frustrating, but yes, the fact that people don't realize that feminism still means you can have a husband, you can still choose to have children, you can still have the picket fence, you can still do all of that. That's not that. Feminism does not mean hating men automatically.
I took my husband's last name not because I was prescribing to some sort of tradition. I took my husband's last name because I couldn't wait to get rid of my father's last name.
Same. If I ever got married, it was that.
And if we wanted to pick an alternative last name that both of us could share together, we would have done that. But, you know, I went through the process of getting my name changed, and let me tell you, it's no joke. It's a lot of stuff that you have to do. I wouldn't necessarily want to do that again. But of course, if they want to pass some sort of stupid act like that, I'll change my name back. I ain't got a problem with that. But you're not going to take away my right to vote just because I'm married and I took my husband's last name. But yes, and for the record, the patriarchy is not the thing that guarantees you a good husband.
No.
I don't know why you're thinking the patriarchy for a good husband, because that has nothing to do.
If anything, the patriarchal system as a whole usually implies a more oppressive, reality, period.
It's very true. I'm glad that you have a good husband. I have a good husband too, but I would never ever think the patriarchy or think that that has anything to do with it. And what I determine to do with my time and with my life, whether that's having babies or not having babies, whether that's being a homemaker or whether that's going out and having a career or doing something, all of it is viable. All of it is possible. The whole point of feminism is to make it possible to have more than just one option, because what people don't realize, because they're not from that generation, and a lot of the people who are speaking on the feminist movement now of the past and condemning it, I'm like, bitch, you didn't live in that time. You didn't know what it was like. You didn't know what it was like to not have your own fucking bank account. You didn't know what it was like to not have any money that belonged to you. You didn't know what it was like to not be an equal participant in your government who are making decisions for you and your body. And the fact that you're sitting up on here and fucking social media living the trad wife, you would have never been able to have your own social media channel talking about being a trad wife and making money off of it, monetizing it, had it not been for the feminist movement.
Sweetie, you wouldn't have been allowed to have opinions, period. You were supposed to stand pretty next to your husband while he thought for you. That is the reality of what the past, not so distant past, was, and what they're trying to bring back. And millennials, we watched our mothers work outside the home while doing everything else in the home.
Yep.
And that is why, as millennials, we as a whole, for the most part, said, I don't want that life. I saw her struggle and suffer and lose herself and work to the bone with no true support, whether married or single. That is not the life we wanted to subscribe to. We didn't want to settle in order to settle down. And we really, as a whole, are the first generation, as again, in a large number sense, that are saying, I don't want typical marriage, kids, the life that, again, was shoved down our throats as what is expected of everyone. Well, mostly women, but everyone.
Well, and then traditional marriage, the way that it looked before, is very much your husband becomes another child that you have to take care of in every sense of the word, even making doctor's appointments for them, reminding them when their children's birthdays are, everything, keeping all your life, your kids' lives, and your husband's lives in order, which inevitably led to burnout. And even as a single parent, it's burnout. And then you just get to the point where you're like, okay, what about me though? What about my hopes, my dreams? What about my fulfillment? I'm doing everything for everybody else, and that's what we watched in our parents, whether they were married or not. We watched them do everything for everyone else and always put their needs on the back burner, and we decided that that's not how we wanted to live our lives. We actually wanted to enjoy our lives, and we didn't want to be stressed out all the time and burnt down to the very base of our wicks. Just because we chose differently, it doesn't mean that we are condemning the way that our mothers grew up and our grandmothers grew up. They didn't have a choice. Do you know how many grandmothers tell their grandchildren, don't get married if you don't have to?
Yes, so
because
many.
Of their lived experience, because of what they had to put up with, because they had no other choice.
And they loved, a lot of them loved their husbands, but they were like, if I could have done it again, I wouldn't have gone married.
You know how many parents
I wouldn't have done any of that.
How, if I could have done it again, I wouldn't have had my kid. I love my kid, but I wouldn't have done it.
And some people get so offended by that because they're like, that makes no sense. If you love them, how could you say that? Because, Susan, you could marry the most glorious man that you have met and made that choice in life, but still, even making that choice, living that choice out, knowing that, yeah, you got lucky and you got one of the good ones, still, because there's a statistic for a reason that married men live longer than single men, and single women live longer than married women.
Well, because
There's
they
a
are stressful.
reason. Even having the best husband, we were all conditioned for women to give and nurture and men to really do the bare minimum. It's exhausting. All these women had to train, even the best ones. They had to train them, and it takes emotionally so much out of you as a woman, physically, emotionally, mentally, that at the end of the day, as much as you love your significant other, your children, it's still possible to look back and go, I could have done differently.
It's a mental toll. It's a physical toll. It's a toll in every way, shape, or form. You always hear shit like, oh, girls mature faster than boys. It's like, no, we set up society so that girls have to mature faster, and that boys get to sit back and really enjoy their adolescence and enjoy the lack of responsibility, whereas the women are told from a very early age to take care of their brothers, to take care of the house, to take care of this, to take care of that. And so we had no choice but to mature faster. Yeah. And so the consequences of that is that we are now in relationships with men who are not as mature as us, which means that we are dragging them along into self-discovery, into better mental health, into better physical health, because they're not even thinking about that. And honestly, that's partly on us as women perpetuating that with our sons, because we continue that mentality that women are supposed to be the nurturers, the caregivers, and therefore we give them the responsibility of doing so. And the responsibility to the boys is just live your life. Just live your life, and one day you'll get a job. But mind you, we're now in the time when women are working too. And then they're supposed to also clean the house, take care of the kids, do all of that stuff in addition to having what do we need you for then? Like, really, what do you contribute? Because I always hear that the man contributes the money. Well, women can make their own money. So what is it that you bring to the table?
Exactly.
Other than money? Because I know what women bring. We bring emotional intelligence to a relationship. We bring emotional stability. We bring maturity to a relationship. They're over there making your doctor's appointments. You're showing up. You don't even know why you're there in the first place.
And you probably gave your wife shit for like 2 days when she kept trying to remind you, make sure you go to your appointment next week. Make sure you go to your appointment next week. Then you get there. Why are you there? I don't know. My wife told me I had to be here.
And that's why women are like, I know what they told me I should want and what I'm supposed to do, but I'm going to rewrite that narrative. I know that I did it in my own life, because when I was younger, girl, I thought I was going to have 5 kids. I thought I was going to have a big old family, because I came from a big family. I came from a family of 6 kids, and I thought that I was going to have a bunch of kids. I wanted to get married at 23.
I wanted to get married at 22 and have like the girl.
But the thing is that I never stopped to go, okay, I know that that's what I'm told, and that's the dream that's being sold to me. Because it's not just that somebody said, hey, you have to get married or you have to be a wife. I genuinely wanted to do that because I was sold this dream, this fantasy of what it was going to be like. And I never stopped to question whether having a constant companion was something that I really wanted, or having 24/7 responsibility of having kids is what I wanted, giving my best years to another human being that is gonna pretty much suck everything out of me that it can. And not because it's bad or anything, but because it's completely and wholly dependent upon me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got a little bit older, and thankfully the marriage thing did not happen, that I started to question and had to really ask myself if that's what I wanted. And at the end of the day, I came out with 2 conclusions. Yes, I really wanted to get married, but I wanted to make sure that I was married to an equal partner and an equal participant who was a full-fledged adult, who could make his own appointments, clean his house, wipe his ass, cook food, all of that stuff, which my husband loves to do. And at the same time,
it's like if you left your husband home for 3 days,
he would survive.
Exactly. Would he and the house survive? Yeah. That is a trick.
And he had our dog George before we even met, and he was taking care of a whole other life. He had plants that he kept alive. That was a good sign for me when I saw that he had plants that were alive and a dog that he took to regular vet appointments. I was like, okay, I can fuck with you. Yeah. And a decorated house that didn't look like he bought the furniture, or he grabbed the furniture from the side of the road.
Yes.
So all that to say is that, yes, I wanted to get married, but it was my choice. Something I realized was a true desire for me. And no, I didn't want to have kids. And I had to grapple with what people were going to say about that. And I had to grapple with the possibility of, am I going to ever regret this? Because, yes, while a lot of child-free people say, I'm never going to regret this, I still had to ask myself that question. And
because you genuinely, because you genuinely wanted for a long time kids.
I don't think I genuinely wanted kids.
Oh, well, you thought, I guess you thought.
I thought I did. Yeah. I had no grid for that. I mean, I had my nephews and my nieces, but like, you know, once they started crying, I could just go, here you go. Take the child back. I mean, I could barely stand hearing kids in public, like crying and wailing and throwing tantrums. I'm like, oh, gotta go. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, those are telltale signs. And yes, people have said, oh, you would make a great mom. And it's like, okay, but doesn't mean that I should be one.
Yes, you know, I was told that my whole life. But you're so nurturing. You're so motherly. Yes. Great. I have enough mothering friendships and people groups in my life. Relatives. Yeah. I'm good. I don't know. Thank you. And I knew I was a rare one where I knew from a very early age that I didn't want. And people tried to convince me otherwise. They tried. They felt like it was their personal mission.
Yeah.
And they were like, wait till you find the right man. You're going to want to make babies with him. I was like, I am pretty sure that's not going to be the case.
Hey, I met the right man, and we don't want to make babies with each other. Yeah. In fact, my husband got a vasectomy because we are so sure that we don't want to have kids. Yeah. We also don't want to have to worry about it. But it's true. I think that a lot of millennial women were like, this is the story that I've been fed my whole life. And I'm starting to see the cracks in that narrative. And I think I'm going to change it. And I think I'm going to create my own story that is catered to me and my preferences, and not worrying about what other people are doing or comparing my life to what other people are doing. Now we have women that are doing all sorts of things. They are
every field.
They are out there kicking ass as entrepreneurs, businesswomen, CEOs,
lumberjacks, contractors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of them have kids, some of them don't. Some of them are single, some of them are married. It's more about the individual and what will make them happy. And for some people, being happy means not being married and not having kids. For some people it is.
Exactly.
But it's about the individual.
Yes. And see, it's interesting because if you really think about it, it's wild to put into perspective that we are the first generation to be raised, and you could mention this earlier, with the same opportunities as boys and men. No generation before us was fully raised. Hence, we didn't, like you said earlier, we didn't have a scope for what our parents went through that went through half and half, where they kind of didn't grow up with it, but then as they got older, it started coming into fruition. And it's funny because I also think about the 90s. If you remember, there was actually a really huge girl power movement.
Oh, yeah.
In the 90s, you had Spice Girls, you had Destiny's Child. Like, there were things that we grew up with that I think definitely also helped kind of train us to rebel against the status quo.
I'm watching Living Single right now again.
It's been so
going
long.
through it. Yeah, going through it all again. And that show is really pivotal to a lot of, especially women of color, to their independence. And here's the thing. I will say this is a slight difference in terms of like within women, is that I believe that women of color have been more independent for longer because they couldn't rely on the patriarchy and their proximity to whiteness to save them or to protect them. So they had no choice but to be more independent. Because of our modern day slavery with the prison system, a lot of women's husbands and a lot of their children's fathers ended up in the prison system. And so they had to be both mom and dad. So I will say that like shows like Living Single were way ahead of their time. You know, this show came out before Friends did. And while, yes, the women in Friends had careers, they didn't really focus as much as being independent, being self-sufficient. They still very much wanted to have relationships and wanted to get married and all of the traditional things. And so with our parents' generation, I feel like, yes, it was half and half. And I feel like they were already well into the swing of being stay-at-home moms and worrying about PTA meetings and not really having as much of an opportunity to work and and decide whether or not they wanted to have kids and wanted to be married. I think working, yes. Being single and child free, not as much. And then with my sister generation, Gen X, I feel like there was still a lot of that traditional value that carried over from the boomer generation, where it was still taboo to choose to be child free. It was still taboo to choose to be single. You're still dealing with that spinster narrative. And now it's like,
Yeah.
I don't care, because I would rather have peace than live with the man who's going to make me miserable for the rest of my life.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't want children. Why am I going to take on a man child I have to also clean up after, get the skids off his underwear? No. Absolutely not.
And imagine how resentful you would be of not only a husband who is not a proper adult, but a child. If you have no desire to be a parent, it doesn't matter if you are financially capable of it. It doesn't matter if you are mature, nurturing, like you said. If you don't want to do it, you are inevitably going to resent having that child and all of the opportunities you miss, all the sleep you're deprived from, all the money that you cannot spend on yourself.
And a lot of women have. I mean, my grandmother's one of them. She mistreated my mother because she never wanted and regretted ever being pregnant. And her generation, imagine. So, yeah, that happens more often, but women try to push and make it happen because society expected that you should automatically always want to be a mother and you should automatically want to raise a child because you're a female. What else is your purpose on this earth if not that?
No, it's true. And the crazy thing too now, which is really wonderful to see, is that a lot of the older generation, our mothers and our grandmothers, who are seeing us step out into independence. When I told my mom that Nick and I had decided that we weren't going to have kids, she looked at me and she goes, "You know what?" Which I never thought this would happen. And she wanted me to have a kid so badly, especially a girl. She used to tell me, "You're going to have all my girls." And I was like, so when I told her that we decided that we weren't going to have kids, she's like, "You know what? That's good." She's like, "Now you can travel." She's like, you're a gypsy like me." Wow. Not the right way of using that word, but
their generation still doesn't know that that's not a term we use anymore. But
basically, like, she means nomad. You're like a nomad that likes to travel and move different places. I've lived so many different places, and she confided in me that she always wanted to travel and that she loves her kids. She doesn't have any regrets, but she wished that she could have done things a little bit differently and had more opportunities to live her life for herself. And we're seeing a lot more of that now. Instead of our mothers pushing us to be more traditional, they're seeing our lives and seeing the benefits of not doing things traditionally, of choosing a different path and going, "You know what? Good for you." Like, that's, I felt that pat on the back, that stamp of approval of like, wow, good for you. And she admitted that having kids would really restrict our lifestyle and the lifestyle that we like to have, which is to travel, and not just outside of the country. We like to do weekend trips all the time, even within the state that we live in. And we like to spend money on our hobbies and different things like that. And she saw what our lifestyle is. She saw how happy we were. And she was like, "Good for you," instead of guilting us or making us feel like we were making a wrong decision. And I'm seeing a lot of, especially grandmothers, I would say they are the ones that are really like, "Don't do it. It's a trap."
They have been very vocal all of a sudden, which is very interesting and very fascinating to see. So yeah, friends, I think that and honestly, that's a drop in the bucket of everything we could possibly break apart and discuss regarding this topic. Again, it's not at all about thinking that millennials are superior in any way. I think that we were handed something, and as a whole, thankfully, for the most part, we decided to take on and choose differently moving forward. Now, whether that trend continues, we have to wait and see. A lot of us are still young enough to keep going and fighting and demanding for change. So we're not done yet, just because there are now newer generations that are in their adulthood and also going to be making big decisions of what our futures look like. But
Yeah.
hopefully we strive to make positive, progressive moves forward. I say that with hesitation because we are taking huge steps back right now.
We are, because our whole country is still run by boomers. But I will say this, I think that this latest male loneliness epidemic isn't just millennial women, because most millennial women are already past marriage age.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot of Gen Z women who are going,
Yes.
I don't want that. So
Yeah.
as far as women go, I can't always speak for the Gen Z men, but as far as the women go, I feel like they're really taking a hold of the independence and the freedom that they
Mm-hmm.
saw us have, and really running with it to where they're no longer afraid to be single for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Being a cat lady is not a threat anymore. It seems like a dream come true, in fact, to so many of them.
And I mean, honestly, they're seeing us in our late 30s, early 40s, looking great and happy with the decisions we're making in our
Yeah.
lives. That, yeah, I think it is something that is hopefully going to continue to inspire people to make the decisions that best suits what they desire and not what society expects.
Yeah. And despite the backwards movement that we have here in this country, I think about all of the women led movements in other countries that I've seen in South America. In France, they just passed a law to chemically castrate rapists. And that is a huge step forward for women. And so I see a lot of the movements in what's happening in Iran right now. A lot of women are at the forefront of that independence movement. So I love being a woman. I'm so glad I was born a woman.
God, seriously. With all the shit and oppression and issues, I still would choose being a woman
Yeah.
any
Who
freaking life.
who do you see out there fighting against ICE right now? Who do you see getting manhandled by DHS agents the most? It's women.
Yeah.
It's women. So we are the best.
So, friends, thank you guys so much for listening. We definitely would love to hear some of your thoughts regarding this. As we always say, be respectful in the comments. It is absolutely okay if we agree to disagree, as long as we do it respectfully in conversation. No need to, be rude or trolly, because if you are, guess what? Either Heather's going to happily set you straight verbally in the comments, or we'll smile and say thank you for your engagement. But we genuinely do want to hear your thoughts, not just from women and not even just from millennials. We want to hear from everyone. And what are your thoughts regarding this? You can go on YouTube, you can go on Instagram, you can go on any of the podcast platforms that allow comments, which some of them do now. So by all means, leave us a comment, subscribe, follow, do all the wonderful things.
Absolutely. And if you guys could leave us a review either on an individual episode or on the entire podcast on those podcasting platforms, we would really appreciate it. Helps us with the algorithm, and it helps get our content out there for others that might be interested in it. Well, this has been a fun one. And until next time, guys, bye.
Bye.